I look out at modern home gardens today, and frankly, I just have to shake my head. Most of you spend your weekends pulling, chopping, and aggressively spraying poison on what is arguably one of the most incredibly nutrient-dense organisms on the planet. And why? Just because you don't understand it. You treat it like an invading enemy. In this explainer, we're going to look at the absolute biological goldmine that's hiding right in your backyard, the stinging nettle. You are actively destroying a forgotten superfood, and today, we're going to fix that glaring oversight.
Seriously, let's dive into this for a second. Why exactly are you running away from a plant just because it has a mild sting? We've somehow developed this profound cowardice when it comes to nature, acting as if any weed that doesn't immediately submit to being chewed on is somehow a useless pest. It's a completely backward way of thinking. That sting, it isn't malice, it's a boundary. And if you actually have the minimal amount of courage required to cross that boundary, you unlock a secret survival tool that humanity has relied on for literally millennia.
To really understand the historical irony of our modern ignorance, just look at the medieval monasteries. While you're out there terrified of a weed, medieval monks and nuns were strictly forbidden from consuming stinging nettle seeds. And no, it wasn't because the seeds were toxic or dangerous. Far from it. Historical religious rules banned them because the plant was recognized as an overpoweringly powerful stimulant. It was considered such a potent energy bank that the church authorities believed it would actively disrupt the quiet, celibate, focused life of the monastery. They respected its power, while modern gardeners just reach for the weed killer.
That sheer biological power makes the stinging nettle an incredible story of botanical survival. It's what we call an extremophyte, a global nomad, really. I mean, while your prized garden tomatoes wilt if you just look at them wrong, the stinging nettle has successfully established itself on every single continent on Earth, with the sole exception of Antarctica. It thrives in damp areas with high nitrogen and phosphate levels, which means it has essentially followed human migration and settlement patterns across the globe, feeding off the very soil we enrich. It is quite literally following us.
And this brilliantly illustrates the pathetic state of our modern diet. I want you to aggressively contrast the weak, sad, watery produce you overpay for at the grocery store, your wilting spinach, your flavorless iceberg lettuce, with the battle-hardened reality of wild nettles. We've bred all the resistance and consequently all the dense nutrition right out of our commercial greens. The nettle hasn't been coddled in a climate-controlled greenhouse. It has to fight to survive, and that fight creates an absolute powerhouse of a plant that makes your standard grocery store salad look like a glass of green-tinted water.
The difference becomes glaringly obvious when you look at the raw numbers. Most of you operate under the assumption that you need to chug dairy to get strong bones or buy expensive supplements. But in just one single serving, cooked nettles provide nearly 50% of your daily recommended value of calcium, not to mention a massive percentage of your daily requirement for fiber and magnesium. It completely outperforms standard lettuce across the board. You should honestly feel a little foolish relying on commercial greens when a single cooked nettle leaf from that patch you just mowed over is a total survival kit and an absolute calcium powerhouse.
So let me pose this question to you. In a survival situation, would you risk a temporary sting for a plant that contains more iron than almost any other garden green? Because that's exactly what the nettle is. It's a critical energy bank and a secret survival tool for modern foraging. If you're facing severe fatigue, or if you find yourself in a situation where nutrients are desperately scarce, this plant is a literal shield. It's packed not just with iron but with potassium, silicon, and vitamins A, C, and E. It is a complete multivitamin growing completely unchecked out there in the wild.
And here's where we find a major glitch in our understanding of vegetables. We tend to assume they're just water, carbohydrates, and fiber. But the stinging nettle is a rare wild plant that provides actual protein. It acts as a legitimate meat replacement in the world of wild foraging. If you're out in the woods and other food sources are scarce, nettle provides the necessary protein blocks for tissue repair. It's a complete paradigm shift for anyone who thinks you can only get protein from an animal.
Now I can already hear the complaints. But it hurts to touch. Well, yes, of course it does. Let's look at why. The leaves and stems of the nettle are covered in tiny, hair-like fibers that act as biological hypodermic needles. It is a highly sophisticated, high-tech chemical defense system. When you brush against them, the fragile tips of these silica hairs break off, and they inject a potent chemical cocktail straight into your skin. It's explicitly designed by nature to keep curious, ignorant humans and grazing herbivores at a very safe distance. It is protecting its nutritional payload.
See, most of you think you have to heavily boil nettles to make them safe to eat, effectively destroying some of the very nutrients we just talked about. But if you're actually paying attention to the biology, you can easily bypass this defense system. First, pick the leaf carefully, pinching it where the hairs don't point. Second, roll the leaf completely flat between your fingers. This physical pressure crushes those fragile silicon needles, completely neutralizing the stinging hairs. Finally, you can now eat it safely, completely raw. Once crushed, it has this wonderfully earthy flavor, kind of similar to high-quality spinach. It really is that simple.
Which brings us right back to those forbidden monk seeds. If you allow the nettle to go to seed, those tiny kernels contain up to 30% oil by volume. They're incredibly rich in vitamin E and act as a wildly potent, nutty nutrient supplement. You can roast them, dry them, or just sprinkle them right on your food. It's essentially a concentrated shot of the very energy that medieval monasteries were so utterly terrified of.
This biological respect seamlessly transitions into our understanding of ancient medicine. For centuries, the nettle hasn't just been food, it's been a go-to medicinal anti-inflammatory famously utilized for arthritis relief. But you have to respect its biological clock. There's a strict harvest window. You must harvest these plants in the spring when they're less than 2 feet tall. If you wait until the plant is older, it becomes completely fibrous, gritty, and frankly unpalatable. It demands that you pay attention to the seasons.
We took a plant that was literally banned in medieval monasteries for being far too energizing, and we turned it into a weed that we blindly spray with toxic poison just to keep our lawns perfectly flat. We are standing right next to a biological powerhouse that grows on every continent, offering more calcium, iron, and protein than almost anything sitting inside your expensive refrigerator right now. To think that a plant that can literally sting you into health is actually just a forgotten vitamin waiting in the dirt, I mean, now that's absolutely wild.